Welcome to Connections. I am Karen Connell, and once again we are here at the Southborough Historic Museum, and we have a very special guest that I am thrilled to interview, Mr. Dave McGilvery, who is a philanthropist, author, public speaker, father, husband, and other things, but you are best known for being the race director of the Boston Marathon. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Karen, for allowing me to be here. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, we're delighted to have you here in Southborough. Mm-hmm. And were there any credentials that I may have missed?
No, but I may hire you as my PR agent.
Okay, well, thank you. And you're also a tremendous athlete, a lifelong athlete.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I'm most proud of.
Very good, yes. Well, that's interesting to us because in our little town of Southborough, our little hamlet, mm-hmm. we actually had 36 official participants in your Boston Marathon this past year. And we think of ourselves as a very healthy community, and we are a community that runs. So the Boston Marathon is the pinnacle, I think, of most runners' dreams. And we were really kind of pleased with ourselves that we had so many official participants this year.
That's fascinating. The whole industry has changed so much since the 70s and 80s. The walls of intimidation have crumbled, and people are starting to believe in themselves and they can do this. And that's what's so fascinating about it. You have both the elite athletes on the front end, but then you have those who have worked really hard, earned the right to toe the line, and then participate in races like the Boston Marathon. And you know, years ago, people used to ask me what I did for a living, and I'd almost mumble, I'm a race director. You know, it was almost embarrassing. Like, what do? You chalk mark in the road and yell, go? You know, and that's basically what I did. But now when people say to me what I do for a living, I say I help raise the level of self-esteem and self-confidence of tens of thousands of people in America. And that's what this industry has become. And that's why I feel really good going home after an event, because I know so many people accomplish the goal, accomplish the dream, and go home feeling good about themselves.
Excellent. And so can you tell us, sir, when you say that you're the race director, what does that mean?
Well, I think conventionally it basically means just what it says. It directs the race. But I look at myself more as a conductor, almost a conductor of an orchestra. With my orchestra are people who know what they're doing in specific disciplines of race management, whether it be volunteer coordination or a medical director or start coordinator, a course coordinator, a finish coordinator. So you assemble experienced people in a certain aspect of event management, and I look at my role as being the one to sort of the needle in the thread. You know, sort of the conductor to make sure that it's all working harmoniously. Everyone's getting along, everyone's communicating. This was my 27th year of doing it for Boston. I've been directing races now for well over 30 years, directed over 1,000 races throughout the world. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that I have been able to surround myself with good people, a great team, and that's really what makes it all happen, and happen at a high standard and high level of quality.
Sure. So, for example, one thing that I've always found kind of interesting about you that I know is, and I'll ask, maybe you can walk us through what Marathon Day is like for you, but one thing that I found very, just speaking of your spirit as a true athlete, once the race is completely over, I know that you were delivered back to Hopkinton at the start of the race, and you run the race yourself. Well,
I had run the race 15 years in a row, and then I got offered the job to help direct it. So I had a really difficult decision to make. What do I do? Do I run in it or run it? And I wasn't sure what to do, and I made the decision to take the job, needed the money. And I was standing at the finish line of that year's Boston Marathon in 1988. And I remember seeing everyone cross the finish line, and even though I was excited for all of them, I was sort of feeling bad for myself that I hadn't run it. So I tapped a state police trooper on the shoulders and I said, "Officer, you do me a favor?" He said, "What?" I said, "Will you drive me back to the start?" He said, "Why, did you forget something?" I said, "Yeah, I forgot to run." So he drove me back to the start, and off I took off at 8 o'clock at night, and I finished at 11 o'clock at night. And I was the last finisher that year. And I've continued that tradition for the last 27 years. So I've been the last finisher of the Boston Marathon for 27 years in a row, and I'm proud of that. And so this year was my 42nd consecutive Boston Marathon.
Wow, that's really amazing. Because I'm a former runner myself, and hoping to get back to running. And that has been a lifelong dream of myself, as well as I'm sure scores of other people even in this town. That is really kind of the epic goal, is to run Boston.
Well, Boston is sort of the holy grail of marathoning throughout the world, not just here in the United States. It's on everyone's bucket list. Got to do this thing at least once. But it's not a matter of just signing up and getting in, or getting in on a lottery. You have to earn the right to be here. And that's what makes it so intriguing to so many people. It's their Super Bowl, World Series, Tour de France, Kentucky Derby all rolled into one. It's every man's sort of Super Bowl. And so, when I hear from so many runners around the world, what's your goal in running, it's to qualify for the Boston Marathon. So even if you never do it, just the fact that you qualify is obviously an achievement in and of itself. So I'm very fortunate to be able to both direct it and then also run in it and do both. So I don't take that for granted. I know that this means an awful lot to a lot of people around the world. So we take our job seriously. We want to put on the best quality race that we can, and I think we've delivered over the last quarter century.
Yes, definitely. And speaking to that, one thing that seems to have changed very recently, and I'll ask you to speak since 1988, how has technology changed the sport of running, and specifically the Boston Marathon?
Insightful question. I think the basics of managing the event have stayed the same, and the course is the same, and a lot of aspects of the race are the same, water stations and clocks and things of that nature. But the three things that have really changed the most are the security of the event, and the medical coverage of the event, and technology. Those are the three things. Three things I know very little about, which is interesting. That's why I surround myself with the expertise. On the security side, obviously, given what happened last year and 9/11, so everyone has responded, and it's all working out very well now, obviously. On the medical side, there's just a lot more people doing it. This past year, 36,000 people. If Mother Nature turns on us and it gets to be really hot like it was in 2012, you really need to be able to provide the medical coverage before you fire that gun, because people are going to get in trouble and you need to be able to respond. So having to ramp up on the medical side has been a high priority. And last but not least is technology. And a lot of it began with with chip technology, where we're able to time and score runners now by using a chip embedded in the bib number. Used to be on the shoe. That has opened up so many different options and opportunities to be able to collect data and then push it out on the internet. And that's really what makes all the difference in the world now. GPS technology is just so much to keep up with. So a lot of times that's what separates one race from another. It's not the race in and of itself, but it's the level of technology that the race brings to their event that other races maybe either can't afford to or don't have the resources to.
Interesting, yeah, because even as a spectator, what has changed for us is that in the past, we would hold signs and look in a vast sea of runners for our friends. Now there are apps where I can tell exactly where my friends and family are along the race.
Yeah, well, we have collection points along the course at every 5 kilometers, halfway, obviously start and finish. So there are 11 locations where we collect data. So once we collect it, we can push it out either on a handheld device or an app or what have you. So people can track online, or we have athlete alert systems where we can send out email or text alerts to people. So, You could be standing at a spot and all of a sudden get a text and so-and-so just passed the 5K at such and such a time, and you look and here they come around the corner. So it's fascinating how the other side of the coin is that you could be a runner and having a bad day, and everyone around the world knows about it because they're following you on the internet. Sometimes, ignorance is bliss. It's good not to sort of expose how you're doing sometimes,
Right.
but you got to take the good with the bad. So it's a pretty fascinating industry given the fact that technology has layered on top of it.
Sure. Well, we know probably about the worst experience that you may have had during your tenure as the race director, but can you at least can you pull forward one example of something that was one of your more favorite things that may have occurred?
Sure. I mean, there's obviously a lot of them. Most of my experiences have been very positive and exciting and emotional and motivating. But I have a motto. My motto is my game, my rules. That's how I live my life. I don't allow anyone to dictate to me how I should live my life. I set the rules. In fact, I wrote a book called The Last Pick, and the last chapter in the book says changing the rules. So you're always able to change the rules too, based on where you are in your life. Well, I got a phone call from this woman about 6 years ago. Her name was Katie. And she said, can I come and see you at the Boston Marathon office? I said, sure. So she came in, and to my surprise, she came in and she was in a wheelchair. I thought, oh, she's in a wheelchair. So she went into my conference room, and I walked over and met with her, and when I saw her face to face, my jaw dropped. And Katie was 26 inches tall. And she looked at me and she said, I have a question to ask you. And I said, okay, what's that? She says, can I run the Boston Marathon? And I thought about it. You want to run the Boston Marathon? She says, yeah, I want to run the Boston Marathon. You want to run the Boston Marathon? Yeah, I want to run the Boston Marathon. I thought about it and I said, ask me a difficult question. She says, I can? I said, yeah. I can run the Boston Marathon? I said, you can. So she said, well, I have a caveat. And I said, what's that? She says, my marathon is 26.2 feet. I said, okay, 26.2 feet, got it. So that year, I barricaded 26.2 feet from the starting line down to a little, right by Ash Street, 26 feet, barricaded it off. She come out in her wheelchair, get in her walker, and I yelled go, and she crossed the finish line in 7.5 minutes, 26.2 feet. I put a laurel wreath on her head and a medal around her neck, and she did it. And then later on that night, I'm running my marathon. 9 hours later, and I'm crossing the finish line on Boylston Street, and I look up. There's one lone figure waiting for me, and it's little Katie. And she was waiting for me at the finish line. And when I crossed, she put a laurel wreath on my head that she made and a medal around my neck that she made. And she looked up at me. She says, ha, I beat you. And that was the most emotional, poignant moment with all the great athletes in the world. Little Katie was the one that just inspired me the most. And she lived by my motto. It was her game. So was her rules. She set it up the way she could, and she accomplished what she set out to do. Now, she's passed on since, but her memory will last forever for me and will inspire me to continue to run this race as long as I physically can.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's kind of indicative that the Boston Marathon is it's a communal event. Everybody starts out as individuals. Everybody's fighting their own fight, running their own race, having their own goals. But when it all comes together on Marathon Monday, it's a communal event, and it's very powerful, and it's excellent. And I thank you, Dave McGilvery, for being race director and for visiting us here today on Connections. Thank you.
My pleasure, and I hope to see you in the race someday.
Me too.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome. We are back here at the Southborough Historical Museum, and we are interviewing my friend, Leah Amon. Welcome.
Thank you.
I want to talk to you, Leah, because I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
You ran the Boston Marathon this past year. And can you tell us about that? How did you get your bib?
So I decided to run once last year's marathon with the bombing, and once all of that came out, I decided I wanted to run again. I hadn't run in about 9 years, so I gave up running, and then I decided to start again. I received my bib through a charity, the Jeff Coombs Foundation. His brother is a personal friend of mine. He had passed away on 9/11. He was on the first plane that went into the trade towers. So I had spoken to his wife, and she was receiving 2 numbers for this year. So I was one of the runners.
Wow, that's quite an honor.
Yes, yes. If I was going to run it, this was the year, and for that charity was the only reason I would have done it.
Wow, so, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Did you finish the marathon?
I did finish. Not an overall wonderful time. I was injured for pretty much all of training. I started out training in December when it was 0 degrees, and then I pulled my IT band and I had knee troubles. So I was going for 2 months of PT, massage and chiropractor every week. And then finally, a month before the marathon, they gave me the go to run again. So I had 3 weeks to train. And so I would say about the 14-mile mark of the marathon, I was great. And then from that point on, it was a little tough. So I walked a lot, but I did finish.
That's very commendable. I'm really proud of you that you set out to train for it, and that you did it in such a short amount of time, and that you completed it.
Yes, yes. You know, and I think the most amazing part of the race was seeing the spectators on the sidelines cheering. There were children screaming, "Thank you for doing this for our city." It was amazing. The whole day was amazing.
Excellent. And you did raise some money for the Jeff Coombs Foundation.
I raised over $11,000 for the Jeff Coombs Foundation, yeah. And they help local, they're out of Abington, Mass, and they assist local families paying bills, widows, service families, with anything that they need. If they need help, they will provide them with it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So it was a personal journey for you as well.
Definitely.
That's nice.
Definitely.
So, but you are an athlete. The most people couldn't just train for the marathon in 3 weeks.
No. And clearly I should have trained a lot better to do better. I had done 2 marathons prior in 1999 and 2000, and I really trained hard for those. And then I had stopped. Yes, but I work out. I had owned a fitness studio. I work out. I used to teach spin. So it wasn't, the cardio was not the hard part. It was my legs giving out. That was the issue.
True, yes. And Leah, you moved here to Southborough, is it 5 years ago?
5 years ago.
Excellent. And where were you originally?
We were living in Hoboken, New Jersey, and that is where we had our children. And then we had lived in Boston prior to that, so then we decided to come back up here.
So how is it running in Southborough as opposed to in a more urban setting?
Very different, especially with the winter we had. The sidewalks were hard, the streets were hard. I would also run into foxes and wildlife and stuff that I didn't see when I was training in Boston for the other races. And it was just, there was just a little, with the snowbanks and the ice, it was a little crazy.
Yes, but you did it.
Yes, yes. And, you know, groups of people would just motivate you. I would run with certain friends. I had one friend in town who wasn't running, and then I would say, "Oh, I have to run 14 today." And she would just run 14 with me, just to keep me going. So it was great. I had a lot of help between a lot of really great friends.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, I am not the friend that ran the 14 miles with Leah.
No.
But
you would have if I asked. I'm sure you would have.
I hope to get back to running as well. Yeah. That's quite a lifetime accomplishment to do Boston.
Yes, and next year I will be on the sidelines watching and cheering. I don't think I would do it again. It was really, the hills are crazy. It's very tough. It was very challenging.
But you, did your family watch the marathon? Did they cheered you on, correct?
They all cheered me on at mile 10. where there was a ton of support. And yes, they were very excited. Everybody was very excited. So it was great. I had a lot, and the greatest thing about running Boston is when you live in this town, you see a lot of people you know throughout. So I saw, I would say, at least every mile, every 2 miles, I saw someone I knew, which definitely helped.
And they recognize you and call out your name,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that makes you want to keep going.
Yes, I would say I stopped a little too much to chat at certain points, but for the most part, yes, it helped so much.
Great.
Yes.
So what would you say would be, what is your advice to someone that wants to run Boston?
I would say they really need to find a good training program. They need a good 4 months to train. And they need to find a running group to keep them motivated. It's really hard to get up and run on your own, especially in the winter, and especially if it's going to snow and be 0 degrees. It's easy to give up and say, I don't want to do it. So you really need motivators to push you to do it. And I would say a great support system. If you're married and your husband does not want you to do it, it's going to be much harder. But I think you have to find a really great training program and stick to it.
Mm-hmm. And what about these new running apps? Are those helpful at all?
Those are helpful. I think if you're the kind of person that is motivated by that, as long as you're going to turn it on and do it, it's helpful. Mm-hmm. But you really need to be accountable for yourself. You need to commit to it, and you really need to train. You can't just get up that day and do it. It's impossible.
Right. So
you're going to get hurt.
So the whole idea of a marathon is, and really what I find inspirational is it's a personal journey, mm-hmm. and there's peaks and valleys,
yes.
literally and figuratively,
yes.
And it all culminates in one day.
Yes, you can have a good day when you wake up. You could feel sick when you wake up. You never know how that day is going to go, and the weather could be great. It could be raining. So you could prepare, but you have no idea how that day is going to turn out. So you just have to hope for the best. I know people that trained wonderfully, did everything right, and they had a bad race. Right. Something pulled that day. So you really you have to hope for the best. But you really have to train and train and train. Your body has to be ready for it.
So would you tell us what your finishing time was?
Oh, I will. I'm not proud of it. It was, I think, just over 6 hours. Perfect. My other marathons I'm more proud of, they were 4:10. So I think if I didn't stop and chat as much as I did, I probably could have done it within about 5 hours.
And
I walked a lot.
Sure.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and but actually for runners, it's just to finish, which is the greatest accomplishment.
Yes, and there was a moment I thought I was not going to finish. I was about to give up, but I did have a friend who jumped in with me and ran pretty much half of it, and he pushed me and would not let me quit. So most of that medal goes to him because he definitely got me across the finish line.
Excellent. Well, thank you to your friend.
Yes,
yeah.
Timmy Quirk.
Yeah,
great guy.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Yes.
And you display your medal proudly, I'm sure.
Yes, I have it in a shadow box with my shirt that I ran in, the number, and a bunch of stuff I saved from that day. The passport that the BAA had given us and the acceptance letter. So I was very proud about the entire beginning to end. My shirt that I ran in, I had written every person that donated money to the charity on the shirt, so they were displayed while I ran. Nice. So throughout my running tank, I had everybody's name written, and I really appreciated every single donation that I received. It was so many generous people. It was, I feel like half of the marathon was raising the money and the other half was training for it.
So you felt like all of those, the spirit and goodwill of those generous
yes.
people were
yes.
guiding you.
Oh, definitely. Just amazing. Just an amazing, I think this community in this area, very generous around Boston Marathon time. There's so many people running it. Everybody tries to divvy it up so they can donate a little to every charity. So that just amazed me.
So one thing that I always find interesting is what people choose for a snack. So I've heard everything along the route. I've seen everything from Doritos to jelly beans. What was your go-to snack that you asked your friends to have along the route?
I had these things called, I think they're called Stinger Bees. It was a sort of like a honey waffle cake. I thought they were great. I also would always carry Lifesavers and gum for the sugar. But I will say, at around mile 20, somebody had a bowl of potato chips. And that was the greatest thing I had the whole time, because the salt, I needed the salt. It was very hot that day, and I was very dehydrated. But I remember grabbing the potato chips. I almost took the whole bowl, and that helped me.
That got you through?
Yes, definitely. But people were handing Twizzlers. I saw watermelon, oranges. The oranges are always a big thing. Potato chips, definitely my favorite.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, I'll keep that in mind.
Yes,
have
next
potato
year
chips.
have potato chips out.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
You and I together will hand them out.
100%. Although I remember the one year that I watched from your place, it was really hot. That was the 90-degree day a couple of years ago. And I handed someone a snow cone, and they thought that was the greatest thing ever. So that's also really, really good.
Very good.
Anything ice, anything salty.
Nice.
Yeah.
Leah, thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your journey through the training for Boston Marathon and your completion of it. We're really pleased to have you here today, and thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.